Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Champaign County Broadband Task Force at 6:32. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Burnett, Carter,
Here.
Conrady, Howard.
Howard is present.
Thank you. Neal,
Here.
Smeltzer,
Here.
Smith,
Present. Here.
Thank you, clerk. We have a quorum. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? First by Eric Thorsland, second by Ms. Cowart. Any discussions? Okay. All in favor? Those opposed? Same sign? Motion carries. Can I get an approval of the minutes for June 10th, 2024? Mr. Mike Smith?
Friendly correction on the second page on the third or fourth paragraph, beginning with Mr. Folk, there's a typo. It should read regarding the people instead of regarding he people.
Good catch. Thank you. Okay, so we got approval of the minutes, first by Mike Smith and second by MC. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot that part. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there any public participation this evening? Okay, seeing none. Is there any communications amongst the board? Okay, seeing that there is none. Moving right along to new business, we have a presentation of NetLink's proposal, discussion, and vote on recommendations to the county board.
So you would like me to begin, I'm guessing?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Very well. So the timeline that we've been on, I wanted to start with an apology. Our team has been able to put together a conceptual plan for the fiber build as you've requested it, that would pass large numbers of households, focusing on rural Champaign. We think it also provides structure that can be expanded later. And we've put a plan together for the eastern border. I appreciate your patience while we put this together. And I know we hoped maybe to meet a little earlier. We've been working with a third party for part of what we needed for this, and they were not quick. And I'm not going to try to make an excuse, but we've then reforged this in the last few days. And I think we have an attractive plan for you to consider. Rather than also give you a hybrid proposal that included radio-based fixed wireless, we're just going to show you a fiber plan. I think you had made it clear that you didn't have interest in pursuing anything wireless. While that would ensure the entirety of the county could see coverage, we're here to listen to your needs and produce plans that you would approve of. So I'm going to go ahead and start my slides, if that's okay. And so this is going to be over on the eastern side and ranges down from Royal through Ogden and Homer, and then turns more towards the center of the county over to Sydney. We've got a 19-mile pathway that we've put together with those 4 towns. Each of those towns, I think the FCC incorrectly labels them as having good service, but it allows satellite or some glitchy thing there to report that. Nobody has fiber in these towns that we can tell. And when we load up all of the households that are in those towns and close by, we get nearly up to well, mid 9,000s, not quite 10,000 households. And that's going to include what I'm calling in and around. So a fiber line would go right through a city, but then, you know, we can branch outward from there a little bit and make that number a little better. And these bullets here are kind of general. I have a few slides that will get into some more specifics. But you know, between the towns along the route, there's also households. Some are near the road and some are further back. So we've got a couple of different distances that can help with that number. But this is going to be a conceptual proposal today, verbal. The most detail that we could come up with in a short time frame so that you can consider this and talk with us and make a recommendation in another week or so to the larger board to use that ARPA money that you didn't want to do something else with or give back. We would be able to follow this up with a much more detailed proposal that would have lots more specifics in it. But because of time constraints, what I'm able to do tonight is give you a very good picture. And this slide here is some of the basic bullet points. We'll get into some details here in a moment. Along the route, if you go 500 meters or yards off the highway, county road, you can get a lot more homes if you go that far. So there's a range between 2,000 and 8,000 homes. And I've got a table here in a little bit. If you're trying to take notes, I'll make it easier here in a moment if you wait. And when you add services or do troubleshooting or repairs, you have to go into these vaults or handholds. We place those at least every 1,000 feet and try to match that up with where they would be needed. With the budget being 4.7 million, we've been able to put this route together with these particular cities on that 19-mile path for approximately 3.5 million. And that leaves then a balance that we can talk about how to allocate that, but it leaves a balance that can be used for the last feet. Sometimes we talk about last mile, but getting up to um, the, the property and how far we would take that. So there's a balance there for not just running down the middle of High Street, Main Street, but connecting out from there and the allowance for that. And so there's some expansion along the route as well. This runs north-south, and then as it turns in towards Sydney, comes to the west. I know on your screen this may be a little hard to see, but I will provide some additional details. So we've got Royal to the north that comes out a little bit and down the route through the two towns, and then makes an L shape coming back over to Sydney. As best use we've been able to find. So here's some numbers for each township. My table didn't have a total, so I added that at the bottom. We've got total counts in town, and if we also look 100 meters from that middle mile fiber lay, we get an additional number. So for Royal, for example, there's 639 in the limits, city limits. But if we push out a football field or so, we're going to have another 471. So Ogden's a fair amount bigger, and even more so for Homer and Sydney. And so as we total those at the bottom, just in and around the cities, we've got more than 7,300 passings available. And if we push out from the center of town a little bit, we can raise another couple thousand. So more than 9,000. I'll have this slide back up again at the end, but feel free to interrupt me if you need to. So here's Royal. We're starting to the north, and these dots represent a household, and they're all underserved. So we're hitting some of that RDOF obligation in that area as well. And it's largely an unserved area in the county from what other things are available. Royal seemed to be a very good starting point. We've got Ogden, the next town coming south. We've got Homer, and we're going to make a turn. And you see these, if you can make these out, these little gray boxes on the red line represent those access points, handholds, they're called, for us to branch out to the people north and south of there. And then we end in Sydney. And so running fiber in around here in any town, is going to use some of that 1.2 million that we've left available besides the primary route. So you can see in the lower table our footage and our mile count. And then along the route outside of the towns, we've got at least, a number around 2,200. That's if you live within a football field of the county road we're coming down. if we push that out to 1,500 feet, which is quite a while, quite a ways, you know, that's more like a quarter mile, that number triples. So there can be a lot of discussion as far as how you want to use some of that 1.2 million that, it's just how we've put it together to think about it today. We're not mandating or dictating anything, but how that balance could be used can come into play along that route and how far things get developed. Based on other projects, we've made the cost per foot for our calculations $35 based on rock and soil conditions and things like that. So that's where we get to not quite 3.5. And our splice point to light up the fiber and get service into it would be a potential arrangement with Great Plains Carrier. Although we haven't spoken to them, we have collaborated with them in the past and assume that would not be a problem. But they're not aware of this proposal yet. So, that is the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about. I can move other slides back up if you want to see a location.
Do we have any board questions?
Yes, ma'am. Craig, thank you for the presentation, sir. Two questions. The 1.2 million that you estimated, is that for the 7,300 locations in town only, or does that also include the 1,900 that are 100 meters from the middle mile?
Anything from middle mile that extends out very far would need some additional funding from that 1.2.
So for the 1.2, we're just looking at the 7,345 as estimate.
As an estimate, yeah.
Okay.
And I really wish that this was a lot more concrete. I'm hoping that you see the good faith we're trying to do here and come up with some numbers. We had a totally different idea in mind until very recently, and a lot of us were out of the office across the holiday. This obviously can get a lot more detailed, and questions can get better answers as well. I am going to do my best to answer your questions, and that's a good one. I think as we look at branching off of that middle mile, customers are responsible for a certain amount of small, but a certain amount of installation cost. And so I think what we'll need to do is talk about, how much of that's going to be necessary. Some people could live very close, and some of those city maps show, people are a few blocks off that line.
Thank you. I didn't catch the name. You said Great something was a provider you had worked with. Is that
Great Plains? It's the last cell in the lower slide here.
And of course, not to hold you to anything, but in the work you've done with them in the past, what would you say would be a estimate for the monthly costs that the folks that would be included in that $7,300 figure would be looking at as a monthly recurring cost?
Thank you. Our plans subscriber month to month are as low as around the $50 mark. And I would say you're not settling for a low speed at that cost. Our slowest speeds are 100 megabits. And most households in America, if those numbers don't quite mean anything to some folks, right? You know, depending on the number of children in a household, you know, half of that is still overkill. So the cheapest plan month to month is in the $50 range, and you can take that up, you know, towards $70 or $80. But most of it's within that range.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any more questions from the board? Well, I do have one question. Just for clarification purposes, you say that, and I'm trying to envision this with those mile or 100 meters from the middle mile town. So I'm asking you, those people that's on the outskirts of where you pointed out where those markers were within 100 meters, they would receive a signal. Is that correct?
Well, it's fiber, so we would have to lay a patch from the household and an installation out to the main line. And um, the further away from that you are, the less easy it is to include that in some of the generic pricing. So uh, I think that laying fiber down every street and around the entirety of the grid of street structure is not what we're trying to do, but pass so that people can tie into that. Um, and some of the 1.2 million will need to allow for that.
Okay. Because I also had in my notes that there was no fiber currently installed, and then it will allow for expansion in the future, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
From my best research, all 4 of these towns don't have fiber available to them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bailey, you have a comment? I see your hand up, Ms. Bailey. Are you on mute?
I was sorry. I'm at a cattle show and don't have great service, ironically. Craig, just a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
How does this proposed route interact with the preliminary PAUs that the Office of Broadband has put out for the BEAD?
So I don't know what that has done to overlay anything in this territory. Could you maybe help me understand your question?
So the Office of Broadband has put out their preliminary PAUs for the BEAD granting process. The maps aren't finalized, but they've put those preliminary ones out. And I was just wondering if your route went through any of those proposed project area units that they have preliminarily put out.
Okay. I don't know the answer to that question, Bailey. I'm sorry. Those proposals put out by state or federal sites, groups, are doing what we're trying to do today. They come up with a population density in an area, and they see who is underserved or even unserved, and where it makes sense from population density. So I believe those serve as guidance for providers like us to then come and see how we can put a plan together. And we look at a lot of different resources when we put a plan together. It could be that, you know, our staff looked at some of that, but we've got direct ties into the FCC for census block data and whatnot as well. So, you know, it seems like your question might be asking, hey, are we going to step on the toes of a future project or screw something up in the future that someone else is planning to do? And I don't think that that's the case, because it takes a provider like Volo or Nextlink or anyone to step forward and say, you know, we want to create a project. And then folks like you and we talk about it. So was that potentially why that question came?
No, not really. It was more thinking about as we would potentially look at extending off of this middle mile, if there would be grant money available for those areas because they're part of the PAU is more my thought process is, okay, how do we, you know, this is great, but how do we extend it then? Where could the money come from to extend that was more my question.
Okay. Well, B does prioritize fiber, but I don't think that those plans, you know, conflict with a plan like this. Expansion happens organically. Once fiber's in place, people tap into it and write collaborative arrangements between them if they're not the same company, like we would with Great Plains. And I think that just unfolds over time. You certainly would be eligible to apply to extend fiber away from any existing fiber, be it a project like this or you know, someone else anywhere in the state or the county.
Mr. Craig, I have one more question for you. You did mention that that those 4 towns would be eligible for RDOF funding. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, ma'am. So RDOF funding across the nation is something that groups like Nextlink competes for. And you know, the more you're willing to put up of your pledge of what you're going to do with the territory, the more likely you are to be awarded that territory. And then you have an obligation to build in that area. So Nextlink has a large amount of RDOF territory. It's splotchy across the map like a shotgun blast, but that's also based on population density and where people are. So when I hear your question, it's not that the resident on the street in the town is eligible for some RDOF funding. That funding is a subsidy that pays a little bit of the bill for a group like Nextlink or Volo to build there. And that money is played out in a slow stream across a large number of years. And this started like a year and a half ago. So what that means, ma'am, is for us to have that obligation to build in areas that we've won RDOF as Nextlink. And we're trying to meet some of that obligation with any project we do with you. And this does carve out a good amount of RDOF. And we're obligated to do that in some time frame. It's several years long, but it's a big state, and there's a lot of it out there for us to do. And when subsidy is available, it's by far doesn't pay the bill, but it helps a business that wouldn't say, hey, it's attractive to go over here where there's not a lot of people instead of, going in the city of Champaign. And so that rural digital opportunity fund encourages us to build in those rural areas. And so we have that obligation and award, so that RDOF funding is going to get some of our attention in a project like this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Craig. MC has a question.
Yes, you mentioned, Craig, the potentially getting some or charging installation fees for some of the folks outside of town. Just wondering, what would you say would be an estimate of that installation fee for us to be able to recover all of the costs, both for the households that are within the 100 meters, and even if we looked at the households 500 meters out, on average, what will we be looking at as far as the installation costs that would be charged to the customer or the homeowner?
And to clarify, sir, I think any customer stepping forward to get an installation done is going to have an installation charge. There are times where we do some special promotion and that changes. For safety's sake, I maybe shouldn't promise anything today that I can't deliver tomorrow. But having a technician come out and tap into that and bring it into your home and set up a router next to your television is going to be some kind of a charge. I think what we normally do is, if you don't want to sign a contract for any period of time, it's maybe $250. If you're willing to sign a contract, we only charge $150 instead.
And so I'm
And
hearing that charge will be in place for people living in town, or even people that are 500 meters outside of town. They would be looking at that 250 if they didn't want to sign a contract.
yes, sir. And I think any household wanting to tap into a network is going to have that. It's the further away from it you are that, the amounts here off 3.5 million and 1.2 million are a little bit arbitrary, in that the 1.2 is the balance left over after the main construction. So, this is not up to us to decide, but suggesting that 1.2 can then help with pushing out those 100 meters and 500 meters and however far off the city limits you are, or off the route between towns. So you have that potential balance also there to pay for those things.
Thank you.
I have another question, Mr. Craig. Could we use that 1.2 million to offset the installation charge?
I'm not sure I see a reason why you could not. And these are ARPA dollars, so if your regulations and using it, it's your money. So you can subsidize certain parts of the project. I'm not sure where an ethical dilemma comes up on, how many houses you push it out to with that. I think that would be a good discussion to table and see. But the 1.2 certainly could be used to get down a city block that we don't have fiber down yet and get close to someone's home, or push out a half mile into the surrounding area of a city. If you found in Royal or any of these towns that 100 meters or so, or 500 meters really wasn't cutting it, and you had a few things that were important to you, we absolutely could lay more fiber along that branch away from the main tree. And the 1.2 million could be used for any kind of project like that to further the construction.
One more question, Mr. Craig. Would the RDOF funding require matching funds?
No, ma'am. Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about anything with the RDOF. It's money that we've been awarded and will get paid out to us slowly over time to do this, and it's independent of your government at this point. You don't have to worry about matching dollars or any regulations on it. It's up to the provider like us who was given that obligation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Eric Thorsland has a question.
Mike
Yeah.
Smeltzer's had his hand up waving for about 10
Yeah,
minutes.
Mike Smeltzer has been waving his arm.
Sorry
That's
about
right. Very patient.
Sir?
Yeah, it would help. Can you all hear me? Yes. A couple of things. Are all these communities in your current RDOF award?
No,
None of them.
not none of them, but Royal, for example, is an island out in the middle of no service that we haven't pushed into that area for RDOF. The more southern of these four, we already have some wireless projects that would cover that RDOF.
Okay. So I may have missed it. What is the process going forward? You want some money from the county, and the county has some money. Does this need to basically become a new RDOF proposal?
No, sir.
Where's all the money
RDOF,
coming from then, I guess?
yeah, ARPA. Sounds a little bit like RDOF in a
Right.
situation like this, but RDOF versus ARPA. So you've got, I think of RDOF as something that's nice to talk about in a situation like tonight, but that's more for our company trying to meet that obligation, and those funds help us a little bit, not tremendous, but it's worthwhile. But the ARPA funding is what you, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I've been along the road with you since January, and I've heard things like, we don't want to give that money back. We want to use our ARPA money. If we can't use it on this, then we'll look at putting a bridge or a road or a new roof on the courthouse or something like that, but we're not going to give that money back. And ARPA is available for a lot of different projects, and you guys have wanted to put it into the broadband.
Right. I understand all of that, but is this proposal going to leverage any other funds, be they state funds, be they other federal funds, or basically you're just putting NextLink funds and the county's ARPA money together and building these four communities?
Yes.
Those are the broad strokes.
Perfect, Mike. And to be transparent and not seem misleading, the RDOF award gives us a little bit of subsidy, again, over many years, to also focus on the areas of the map that deals with. So to truly answer your question, we're looking at NextLink money, ARPA money, and then we get a little bit, let's call it like a royalty check or something like that. We get a little bit of something on a monthly basis from that RDOF award if we're getting into an area that we haven't served. But as you already asked, some of this area is covered by some of our fixed wireless products that we put in just as a business without a government proposal or collaboration. So some of the RDOF is already covered. Did I dance around or did I answer you?
Oh, that's the answer. Um, So this would be a simple deal between NextLink and the county and would not involve the state of Illinois Department of Commerce and would not involve NTIA. This is just a small deal between NextLink and the county.
Your full-time staff that I believe is in that large room usually probably can answer that really well, because I'm not totally familiar with what regulates how you spend that money. I think we make more details to a plan if you like it. We flesh out that skeleton further. And when it gets down to it, we want to move forward. We talk about how to proceed if there's any prepayment, or you do a bit of work and get a partial payment and you complete the project and you get the balance and those kinds of things. There may be some ARPA regulation on how you write the checks. And I'm actually not familiar with that, but I bet your staff is.
Has NextLink given up on the concept of applying to get money through the state? I mean, the matching part of, you get sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times your funds to work with and to build a project with. If you're dealing with federal broadband dollars, which are channeled through the state, it doesn't seem like we're leveraging anything other than we're spending some money we already got. Is it too late for you guys to get back? I mean, you did not get an award the first time, but there are ongoing things going on with the state. Have you given up on that as a possibility?
No, there could be another round of that coming, but we were given a no for now, and that probably covers the foreseeable future, Mike. So that Connect Illinois stuff and some other monies, Volo got approved and we did not. These are considered what they classify as high cost projects, and the cost per foot to get down a highway is essentially why, as it's expensive, we weren't chosen. Volo's numbers were different in some way. I think they were asked the same questions we were and had to defend it, but that window closed for all of us except you and Volo. Our piece of it closed. Because BEAD is coming, what I think I've been told by the state is they won't open that back up again until BEAD has flowed, so that they don't overlap in time. So we might see something after BEAD, and because that is probably a fairly long period, your ARPA funds are expiring. Again, I hate to say something if you already know this, just regurgitating what I've learned from sitting in your meetings, is that you need to allocate that now for fiscal year. And if you haven't allocated it by the end of December, you can lose it. And the funds need to be spent in the fiscal year of, or the calendar year of 2025. And so that ARPA window exists now to take advantage of it for you. Then we'll have BEAD, and then maybe there'll be some other state funding on the other end. These are best guesses.
Okay.
There's nothing else for me to leverage today to get a project done with any other subsidy.
Okay, thank you.
Madam, I would follow up to Craig's comments and concur. Mike, the current funding cycles for state or federal programs, there are none active right now. The next active one is Illinois BEAD, which is Connect Illinois Round 4. We don't have a precise timeline of when that will deploy, but via arrangement with both NextLink and Volo was the indication that if the state grant Connect Illinois Round 3, if either one of the providers were not successful in achieving that grant, that essentially the proposal would be reassessed on what would be the go forward, coming back to this group for advice and counsel, and recommendation to the board. And so this is a part of that process because, NextLink was not successful in Connect Illinois round 3. And essentially the state said, stop sending in applications. We have way more projects than what we have money to allocate. That there's literally no existing federal or state broadband program active now. The only one that's going to be active in the near horizon is BEAD for Illinois, but we don't know exactly when that's going to open up. But this is really following the process outlined in the agreement with NextLink. And so with that being said, knowing that the budget process is launching next month, it is that reassessment of what this, what this proposal is for. So Craig, if you will permit me, maybe a couple follow-up questions.
Please.
When the team assessed this particular area, does this match up to the area that was kind of, partitioned for NextLink? I know that there was discussions whenever both agreements with Volo and NextLink were initiated that essentially the partitioning of the county occurred. Do these areas, can you confirm if these areas fall within that area that was apportioned to NextLink or no?
I didn't put that proposal together, and I just came on the team just before January when I came and sat in that room with you for the first time. So I wasn't part of that research.
Okay, so we'll need that confirmation because it's important that on the initial onset in which portions of the counties either provider was going to go for, with the understanding that the areas had to be quote unquote grant eligible to receive service. And so we would need to confirm that piece, that the areas that you're proposing here fall within that apportioned area that was dedicated to Next. Because Volo was making, I'm sure, those same types of presentations within, and again, I don't have that exact map in front of me from Volo. But we would need to make sure via that arrangement in that apportioned area of the county under the memorandum of understanding that we don't have confliction there. And then also you had mentioned the potential of utilizing a little bit of RDOF. I would caution that because essentially ARPA has a rule from the Treasury that you can't intermingle federal funds with other federal funds. So we have to steer clear of that these particular areas cannot receive benefit from ARPA or RDOF together. They have to be mutually, exclusive of each other for that. And this is way of what Mike's question was. So essentially the core route, 19 miles, 3.44 million, the remaining balance of the 1.2, essentially what you were looking at was that $4.7 million in ARPA. So do you have in general, what would be the NextLink dollar commitment to this proposal?
No, honestly, putting the numbers together and trying to be accurate on the pathway and the towns, the cost per foot and the household count, I don't have total project and what those other pieces are.
Okay.
And if you want to get with me tomorrow as well, or email, these are great talking points and sounds like they're super critical.
Craig, quick question. So hearing that you're not going to be able to use the RDOF funds in these areas, is that going to sway the decision to move forward or the amount of money you would expect or hope that the county would put towards this project with you all not being able to capitalize on RDOF?
Yeah, so I'm sure that's why Tim brought it up. If it's a conflict, then we either have to, speak up and say, something about that and put it out in the light of day, or potentially give up the RDOF sections. And so, yeah, all of those things could change how that happens.
Okay, Miss Michelle Jett has a question for you.
Yeah, I don't know, Tim, it might be more for you. I just wanted to confirm for sure, thinking long term, these areas, I get what you're saying about not crossing over with Bolo's territory, but these areas also fall within future BEAD funding. So if we started something, we could in the future continue to apply for more funds for these areas. Do we know that?
Given I'm getting this just as the group is, I can't say for 100% degree of confirmation here. What I can say is just based on a quick visual of what was deemed eligible during the RFI process itself, which was using very similar definitions of what BEAD is now. A couple of these communities were outside of the grant eligible area. But again, it's just coming at me cold without really kind of analyzing it, so to speak, if you will. But I do know that the state of Illinois, one of the few states in the union that do this, they actually make a grant eligible layer available for the state. And that is something that I'm sure when NextLink was making application to connect Illinois, same with Volo, they pulled in that grant eligible layer, making sure that they're meeting the truest spirit of the application for funds. And so the latest FCC data just released like a couple weeks ago. And so to take the newest layer from the state of Illinois, if they have a new one, sometimes it takes the states a month or so to update. But we still could take the most recent layer and layer it against here to say, because that's really what the RFI process does. We were wanting to leverage a match for the areas that the state was deeming eligible, which gave the county confidence, okay, we are investing in truly eligible areas of the state for the Champaign County. But to know offhand, I do just, and again, it's just a visual look. I know a couple communities fell outside of the grant eligible area that we did in the RFI process, which was very close definitions to what we're using for BEAD. But with not being able to, this is the data geek part of me, without getting the data layer and marrying it against to another layer, it's hard to say. But my biggest concern, and again with, is just really knowing what the full financial ask is. You know, what is the county's request, the request of the county, what is potentially NextLink willing to put into the mix, and the numbers here in front of us. So.
If I can ask a question real quick. So your acts for this evening, we're supposed to vote on the presentation that was just presented to us, but it doesn't have all of those details mentioned.
That is what is in before you, a potential recommendation of what you would like to do in advising the county board as they move forward in their process in itself. Well, with the proposal, being brought this evening, you have to kind of assess what you have, what you don't have. Do you have enough to make a decision or do you not? All things that, as advisor, I would advise you to ask yourselves, do you have, a clear picture to move forward? If it's unclear, what would you need? And if it's not clear enough, the uncertainty of what we're dealing with here is also the calendar, because the budget process kicks off next month. But again, at the same time too, the task force needs to have its questions answered. So, I would ask, everyone around this table to make sure you have asked your questions of Craig, so he has an opportunity to answer, as well as any task force members that are online, making sure that they get their questions answered too.
Miss Bailey, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, Craig, as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm just wondering what your verification process was to make sure that these communities might not already have fiber. Yeah, I'm fairly certain some fiber had gone into Ogden at one point, and it may have been Middle Mile, but I was just wondering what your process was there.
Thank you, Bailey. You know, we looked at a couple different databases. One of them is directly with the FCC, and you can select what type of technology. You know, you look at a zone and you see all those dots for the households come up, and then you can filter for satellite, for cable, for DSL, for fiber, for fixed wireless, and mess with that and see what your results are. And today with the FCC, we saw that Ogden and all four towns, St. Joseph had fiber, for example. So, you know, originally I thought we might include St. Joseph in that grand plan, but they had fiber from what we could tell. So to verify that, I mean, I didn't get a stamped notary certificate from anybody, but the FCC is a very good source of where things have been built and come through. And you know, I feel almost like what Tim said. You know, he's just seeing this tonight, like you are for the first time. This is all very fresh, and so I'm also a little bit at a disadvantage for some of the particulars. But I can answer your question and say, yeah, we verified that wasn't there. The fiber could be dark, it could be Middle Mile feeding St. Joseph, but not branched out into that town it went through. But due diligence showed it not served by fiber today.
Thank you. And like I said, I wasn't sure. It very well could have been dark or Middle Mile. I was just curious. So thank you.
Yes. You know, I'll throw out a little detail because I've sat on several boards myself, and I can only imagine what you're trying to do with information that doesn't quite seem complete with a couple of the points that Tim brought up. I'm really glad that he did, and thank you, Tim. Pretending like I'm a board member tonight, I might say one thing we could talk about is if you have general faith in the ability for us to work together and create projects, and we feel like if we didn't have the deadline of next week when the greater board meets to choose something tonight, we can potentially say, you know, well, maybe we have to do something else. Maybe we have to make some changes to this. But, you know, given another month past this deadline, we can get, you know, very detailed and answer those questions and present and have those points brought up that we answer again. So potentially, and you know, it won't. You choose what's best for you, but you potentially could say, well, we want to do something with this funding, or we're going to lose it. Do we think working with NextLink can create some kind of a plan? Maybe this one, maybe a slightly different one, maybe a very different one. And you know, we can work on that together.
Okay. Miss Michelle Jett has a question.
I just wanted to back up on process a little bit, if that's all right, Chair, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, so we had the contract with NextLink that had the BEAD additional funding in it. And because that didn't come through, we have a clause in the contract that we go back and in a good faith effort, reevaluate what we're going to do with the money that was earmarked in that contract, the 4.7. And so that's what we're doing right now. And that was kind of the precursor of the conversation we had a month ago, right? They had the alternative wireless access plan that they wanted to to run by you to see if there was interest in them developing a proposal for that. You all were pretty clear you were interested in that. I personally feel, and everyone's welcome to disagree with me, but I felt it was pretty clear at the end of that meeting that this task force wanted a proposal that was fiber at a minimum, mostly fiber, and they wanted it before the July board meeting so that they could review it and then have a recommendation to the task force if something needs to change. So I'm a little disappointed in the quality of proposal that we've gotten right now. I think there's some really major questions that are up in the air that are going to leave it very difficult for you all to make a choice. So to be clear on what needs to happen, you don't have to do anything right this moment. So you could wait, excuse me, sorry. We could list out those specific questions that we have and wait another month for the proposal to be fleshed out more, and then take that recommendation. And if you want to do that proposal, we actually don't need to take anything to the board. We would just redraft the contract to be accurate. So we could do that. If we're feeling that maybe there's a different direction that needs to be looked at or investigated, we do need to make that happen sooner rather than later, because it's almost mid-July. And if we want to have the money allocated by the end of the year, that's really not a whole lot of time in the government world to get something done. So that's kind of the impetus tonight is, if you want to keep on this path, that's an option. If you feel like you've done the due diligence and considered this and you want to move on and try other options, we can do that as well. But I think that we need some level of direction so that we can ensure that whatever the allocation may be by the end of the year, we have that documentation completed to the requirements of the ARPA funding, and we don't risk losing the money because we didn't have that allocation completed.
Okay, so I would suggest hearing from each one of our task force members where we should go with this. So I'll start with you, Mr. Mike Smith.
I'd recommend going down this road for the broadband. While it's not vetted to the degree to know how much of the 4.7, what towns are going to get it, this feels like the right direction for what the task force was founded for.
I would like to echo to Mr. Mike Smith. I just didn't want us to vote on these specific towns, and then if there is conflict with the funding, then that was my question, so I would definitely agree to moving forward this evening. MC?
So we're saying if we are given a head nod to move forward, it's not necessarily for these 4 towns? Is that what I'm hearing? So, okay. Okay, I would agree with that then. Same, move forward.
Mr. Eric Thorsland?
Sometimes I feel like I'm grabbing like a slippery water balloon and I'm not quite getting a full grip on this. And this proposal doesn't seem like it's fully inflated. I'd like to have more detail, but what you did put together is what we asked for in the last meeting. We didn't want wireless. We wanted a fiber proposal. We have one before us. I'd love to get more detail. I don't know that can happen with any level of accuracy before this July meeting. But as Michelle just pointed out, if we can get more detail and have another task force meeting, even if it's not in time for the July board meeting, and we like what we see, just to be clear, we can just say, go ahead and do that. And we don't really need to vote on it, right? It's just a contract change.
Yeah, we would just update the contract and sign it and move forward. It's if you don't want to stick with NextLink that we have a much longer process that we
Okay.
would need to go through.
Well, then, I will tentatively support moving forward with this with more detail.
Okay, thank you. MC?
Sorry, quick question. So that much longer process, as we're under contract with both NextLink and Volo, if we wanted to say, hey, Volo, give us a proposal on how you would use this 4.7 mil, is that A, something we can do, and B, with that shorten that lengthy time frame of going with a different provider?
You cannot ask for Volo's proposal while you're entertaining this proposal. You need to make a decision on this proposal first, and then we could ask Volo what they would do with the funds.
Can I make a brief statement? I know you're in the middle of going around, but Michelle, what you said last month was, hey, there's a stipulation in our contract that we have to give NextLink an opportunity to come back with a different proposal. Almost like a first right of refusal kind of a clause. I feel very confident that if things don't work out, regardless of the vote tonight, we will get out of the way if you need to move in a different direction. If we've got a contract or a memorandum of understanding, we don't want to hold you up. And I report to the chief strategy officer, who's also our chief legal officer. And you know, if I make that kind of a statement, I'm sure he'll allow us to back that up. I think we would do that organically if you want to move in a new direction or ask Bolo to step in. If it's because of the paperwork you have with us that would delay, or we'll try to get out of the way so you can move forward.
Well, we're absolutely honoring the contract that we have with you. If NextLink is feeling a change in, potential vision or commitment as to what could be done, because not only now do we need to redo the program, but then you have, a year to do the work. We have to talk with Kathy about if it could be extended into 26. I'm not sure about that piece. I think that, it would be best case scenario for us if we had the ability to talk with Volo at the same time. That would require a written release from NextLink for us to be able to do that. And I'm happy to follow up with you. I think the bigger question is, given the new financial circumstances, does NextLink truly want to do this project at this point? Because if not, that's understandable, but let's have that conversation and figure out, again, what is the best way to use this money to get fiber to the most people we can in the county?
I don't think we would have put a proposal together if we didn't want to help you in this way. But since we do have some gaps in what we thought versus what we know, in ARPA overlapping with RDOF and the other territorial things, I'm just saying I don't want to compete against myself, but at the same time, we want to help you step away in a new direction if that's what's best for you. And it's the timeline that's given us the problem. When we met last month, I was asked, how long does it take you to put a proposal together? Do you need 45 days? And I was like, well, didn't you just say in the middle of July you meet? I think we can get this done in 2 or 3 weeks. And, a third party that we were relying on for some information held us up for 2 weeks, maybe more. So I'm feeling like we've got a blemish for trying to put together something very quickly and having a question or two unanswered. So just in good faith, I think in good faith, we can say we'd love to do some kind of a project with you and iron out those details, even if it changes from what you've seen tonight. Or if you don't want to move in this direction either, and I appreciate you saying if we don't want to do it, but if you don't want to do it, I think it would be fine if you wanted to ask Volo of their ability to do that. And I've already said that twice now, so I'll let you go back to your deliberation.
Okay, I would like to ask our newest broadband task force member, Miss Lorraine Colward, if she has any comments.
Well, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I don't know too much about the project. But it seems to me that NetLink is not really up to par for doing this here because of the time restraint. So if we want to conversate with Bolo, we should do it now before we grant Netflix their request. So I'm not for going forward with it until we.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Colbert. Mr. Eric Thorsland?
Thank you, Lorraine. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes is important to come to something in the middle of the process. Given what Craig has said and what the feel I get from Craig is that you would not be, and your company would not be upset if we decided that we wanted to entertain what we could do with this funds with Volo, who's rolling on some other things. I would be inclined, and I wish we could talk to both right now at the same time. And Michelle, you have clarification for me?
I was gonna offer a proposal. So,
Okay.
why don't, Tim and Craig work on answering the questions that you have on the existing proposal? And we put a time frame of being able to hear that in early mid-ish August for this task force. And I will work with, Andrew in the civil division and Craig to secure the appropriate legal release for us to also reach out to Volo and ask them to draft a proposal as well, that ideally we can consider in August at the same meeting at the same time.
That would be what would make me feel less like I didn't have a grip on the situation.
Okay, Mr. Mike Smeltzer?
Hi. If you're going to take a vote tonight, I don't get to vote because I'm not physically there, but I would strongly urge you not to move forward with this. I think I keep coming back to the old musical called The Music Man. And the guy who was trying to sell trombones says, you got to know the territory. There is a company, I do believe, that is headquartered in Champaign that's building fiber to all of these communities on their list. And that would be pretty easy for somebody to find out if they were doing in-depth research. The name of the company is Pavlov Media. They're not unknown. They've been around for a while, and they're out building fiber in, I believe, all 4 of these communities. So does the county want to spend its money putting a second fiber provider in some of the county when the rest of the county has nothing? Or do we want to find places that aren't in the process of being served by existing providers with their own money? You know, Pavlov was a contender for this. We did not select them, and they're just spending their own money to provide the services. I don't think this is well researched, and I don't think we should go forward with this in any way.
Thank you for that comment. You just sparked up something in the back of my mind that I was also thinking about. I3 Broadband is now introducing services in District 6 that has not happened before. So they are currently in District 6 installing fiber optic cable throughout our district. And I was, just wanted to add that in there because I didn't know if that would have been included with, the plans that with the affordable housing community that's right down the street from me. So, I mean, there is a lot of questions that I still do have, and I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward tonight and voting yes to move forward without all of those questions that were asked answered. So, is it okay to conclude this meeting for this evening, and then we will wait for the additional requested information, Michelle?
Yeah, but could we go ahead and set the date for the next meeting while we're all here? Just so we also don't have any confusion as to when things need to be ready.
So approximately 4 weeks and a couple of days from today, August 13th. Tuesday, August 13th.
That's the cow.
Oh, sure is. That is the
But
thing.
August 6th, there's no,
That'll bring us right at the 4 week mark, a couple of days short, but
We
August
have-
6th.
We have facilities on August 6th, so they'll be in here. But, I mean, we could do the 5th or the 7th.
On the
I would
5th.
support either one of those days.
The preference from Bailey would be the 5th.
My preference is the 5th also.
Okay, I have an engagement with the city of Champaign on August 5th. So it would be that evening though, same time, 6:30? Okay, August 5th, 6:30, sounds good. So our next scheduled meeting would be August 6th or August 5th, August 5th at 6:30. Okay, moving right along. Any other business that we just took care of, the date of the next meeting? No chairs report, so I would like to call this meeting adjourned at 7:52. Or 7:47, I'm sorry. That's fast. Thank you.